Welcome to the Explainer. Okay, before we dive in, I want you to just exist for a second. Right now, on your skin, in your gut, and even on the device you're watching this on, there's an entire invisible world absolutely teeming with life. Today, we're going to explore that world and find out how discovering it changed, well, pretty much everything.
So let's kick things off with a number that's going to sound a little strange. 40 trillion. That's roughly how many bacterial cells are living in and on your body right now. Now get this. You only have about 30 trillion of your own human cells. Yeah, you heard me right. By the sheer number of cells, you are officially more microbe than you are human.
In this massive, bustling city of microbes, that's what we call your microbiome. And it's not just along for the ride. You can almost think of it as a newly discovered vital organ. It's an organ that helps you digest your food, it makes essential vitamins for you, and it even acts like a drill sergeant for your immune system, teaching it who the good guys are and who the bad guys are.
Now, in this community, you've got two kinds of members. You have your normal microbiota. Think of them as the permanent residents. They're there for the long haul and are absolutely essential for your health. Then you've got the transient microbiota. They're more like tourists. You know, they might stick around for a few days, maybe a few weeks, but they don't really settle down and make a home.
So, the big question is, how did we go from being completely blind to this invisible world, to understanding just how powerful it is? Well, that's the journey we're taking today. We're going to meet our invisible companions, find out how we first saw them, dive into a huge scientific debate, witness a revolution that changed medicine forever, and finally, learn to appreciate these microbes as our allies.
Okay, so first up, who are these invisible companions? It's kind of easy to just lump them all together, but the reality is they belong to huge, completely different categories of life.
You know, for the longest time, we just called everything a germ. But then in the 1970s, a scientist named Carl Woese completely redrew the tree of life using genetics, and he showed us there are three main domains. First, you've got bacteria. Their cell walls have this unique stuff called peptidoglycan, kind of like a chain link fence that gives them structure. Then there's archaea. They look similar, but they don't have that peptidoglycan, and these are the extremophiles, the guys that love living in volcanic vents and super salty lakes. And finally, there's eukarya. That's us. It's everything with the true nucleus in its cells, from plants and animals to fungi.
And this table really shows you that diversity. You've got bacteria and archaea, the simple prokaryotes with no nucleus. Then the eukaryotes, like fungi and protozoa, which have complex cells like ours. But the real mind-bender, it's right there at the bottom, viruses. Notice how they're called acellular. They aren't even cells. They're basically just little packets of DNA or RNA that are totally inert until they hijack a living cell to reproduce. They live in this super weird gray area between being alive and not alive.
So you have all this incredible diversity we just talked about. And for pretty much all of human history, we had no idea it was there. So how did we finally crack open the door to this invisible world? Well, it all started with a couple of pioneers.
So our first clues came way back in the 1600s. In England, you have Robert Hooke, who looked at a thin slice of cork and saw these tiny empty boxes that he named cells. A huge first step. But the real bombshell came from a Dutch cloth merchant, Anton van Leeuwenhoek. Using these amazing little single-lens microscopes he built himself, he looked at a drop of rainwater and saw life. He was the very first human being to see live microorganisms, these animalcules as he called them, just zipping around. I mean, can you imagine? An entire universe was just discovered in a single drop of water.
Leeuwenhoek's discovery was absolutely revolutionary. But it also opened a giant Pandora's box of questions. I mean, if these tiny little creatures were everywhere, where on earth did they come from? And that one question kicked off one of the biggest, most intense scientific debates of all time.
Yeah, this wasn't just some small disagreement. This question started a scientific firestorm that would pit an ancient belief against a brand new idea, a debate that literally took almost 200 years to finally settle.
On one side, you had spontaneous generation. For centuries, this just seemed like common sense, right? You leave meat out and maggots just appear. It really looked like life could just spring out of nowhere from non-living stuff. On the other side was biogenesis, the idea championed by scientists like Rudolf Virchow, which said, no, life only comes from other life. Living cells can only come from pre-existing living cells. The problem was, for the longest time, they had no definitive way to prove it.
And then along comes Louis Pasteur, who just settles the whole debate once and for all with one of the most brilliant and elegant experiments in the history of science. He took a flask of broth, boiled it to kill anything inside, and then, and this is the genius part, he heated the long neck of the flask and bent it into an S shape. Now, air could still get in, but any little microbes floating around on dust particles would get trapped in that first bend. And he waited. Weeks went by, then months. The broth stayed perfectly clear. Then, for the final mic drop moment, he just tilted the flask so the broth could touch that trapped dust, and within hours, it was swarming with life. Game over. Spontaneous generation was officially dead.
And here's the crucial point. Pasteur didn't just end a debate. By proving life comes from other life, he opened the door to one of the most important ideas in all of human history, the germ theory of disease. Think about it. If microbes from the air could make broth spoil, couldn't they also get into our bodies and make us sick?
And that idea launched the first golden age of microbiology. I mean, this was a period where the world just changed at a dizzying speed. Suddenly, we could fight back. Joseph Lister, inspired by Pasteur, created aseptic surgery, saving countless lives from infection. Robert Koch provided the definitive proof, showing exactly how to link one specific germ to one specific disease. This era gave us everything. We finally understood how vaccination worked, we got the first magic bullet drugs from Paul Ehrlich, and of course, Alexander Fleming's famous accidental discovery of penicillin, the first antibiotic.
And what Robert Koch gave us was so important because it was a repeatable, scientific method. Think of his postulates as a detective's handbook for finding a microbial killer. First, you have to find the suspect at every crime scene, in every sick patient. Then you have to isolate that suspect and grow it by itself in the lab. Third, you have to show that your isolated suspect can cause the same disease in a new healthy victim. And finally, you have to recapture that same exact suspect from the new victim. This was the rigorous proof that medicine needed.
But, after a century focused on germs and disease, it's really easy to get the wrong impression. The truth is, the pathogens, the bad guys, they're just a tiny, tiny fraction of the microbial world. The overwhelming majority are not our enemies. In fact, they're our most essential allies.
I mean, these microbes are basically the planet's master chemists. They recycle all the fundamental building blocks of life, carbon, nitrogen, you name it. They clean our water, and they can even clean up our worst messes, like oil spills, through something called bioremediation. And of course, we've put them to work in biotechnology to make everything from bread and cheese to life-saving drugs like insulin. To put it really simply, without all the good things microbes do, life on Earth as we know it would just stop.
So the field that started with just one guy marveling at wee little beasties in a drop of water has absolutely exploded. Today, you have entire fields dedicated to just studying bacteria, or just fungi, or just parasites. And you have amazing fields like immunology, which is all about understanding that complex dance between our bodies and this invisible world.
And this whole journey brings us to a really profound place. We've gone from not even knowing these creatures existed, to blaming them for all our diseases, to finally understanding their vital role in our health and the health of the planet. And now, with tools like genetic engineering, we are literally rewriting their code. It leaves us with a huge question for the future. As we start to use this incredible power, are we just curing diseases, or are we starting to redesign life itself?